All right. Guns, lots of guns. With the subtitle, there's no silver bullet. This is a quest for perspective. So I don't know if you've guessed what we're going to talk about here, but there will be references to different movies and also going way back in time. I'm going to start with some drama, like a prologue or something like that, but then I have like 3 different kind of chapters in my speak. One of them could be something like, how did we get here? And by here, I mean, how did we end up in a situation where mostly boomers and Generation X, white males, think that they can control the agenda and continue to basically claim that DevOps and Agile and object-oriented programming and relational databases is still interesting? How do we get here? I'm going to take you back on a journey from far away, because we've been talking about Agile, we've been bashing Scrum, we have been bashing Safe and everything, but actually I like to go back in history and see where it all came from. And the history of software development in IT is not very long, so we don't have to go very far back. Actually, I'm born in 68, and I am going to make a touchdown in 68, but I'm going to start in 75, move up to 86, and then we're going to end up here at some point. And then maybe go to the second part where I'll tell you a little about how I got here. Well, as I said, I don't know where we are, but I know how I got here, and I'm in a position right now where I've changed my life for the past 30 days. I got a job. I haven't had a job for 20 years, so that's quite exciting. I'm going to talk to you about that. Lastly, I'm going to ask you, what can we do about that? And I'm going to give you some of my insights into how I think that, personally, how I'm going to tackle it. But let's start with some drama. This is a Menti, Menti, where audience like you would actually go in and vote. I did this in April, half a year ago, at a really Vogue conference. It was DevOps days, right? This is one of the hottest topics we have in our industry right now, DevOps, right? This is where the young people are supposed to be. And when I asked the audience, just basically to vote which generation cohort they belong to, in the beginning, it looked really, really well. We had a lot of millennials coming in there, and we said, okay, this is great. And then we couldn't really, I think the voting stopped when we had like 50 votes. And then we went on. And then when we came back after, we saw that there were actually 250 who actually managed to vote. It was, like this set up like here. And then all the boomers actually just, got off the chart. They were so late, they couldn't even find out how to vote in Menti, right? But they came in there, right? And my point is really that we have an industry which is populated mostly by white male and over 40, Generation X, Generation Boomer, and there aren't many young people. So the quest that I'm looking for, I'm going to get to the point why I have specifically these people in mind, but I'm going to help, this is my mission, the Generation X, the Zoomers, the ones that probably aren't here today, because they are at school trying to teach what we're going to use them for, right? They're so young that they're not even in the labor market yet, not really. The millennials are, but the Zoomers, they're at school, right? And the problem is that in many industries, what we see is that when you are 30, you're considered old, right? And they really want people to come in really, really early. If you're in medicine or physics or any other area, we would like to invite young people in, and we see that as novelty or whatever. But what we do in our business is really that we take the young people in, and then we try to mold them to become very much like us. They're supposed to know everything about Agile. They're supposed to, embrace Kubernetes and Docker containers and start doing that or whatever, right? But they're already doing a lot of stuff that we're not really perfectly aware of. One of the things that they do is that they don't know what the ops in DevOps is. To them, it's all code. Because they would just go into some serverless environment, collaboration environment, and they would just spin up code that would magically run on containers in the backend. They don't know what it is. And they get everything for free, right? They get collaborative environments like GitHub and GitLab. They get A and B testing. They get feature toggles. They get automated deploys. All that they get for free from the platforms that they're using. So this is a point that I'm trying to see if what we can hand over to them, all the old ones. I'm not going to ask you and divide you into cohorts like I did in DevOps days, because some people found it really embarrassing, actually, to reveal their age. Men can have it like that, But the young people, they're more like Pippi. The Pippi from Astrid Lindgren says, I don't know how, I haven't tried that before, so yes, I can do it. Right? And they actually go out and do a lot of stuff that they don't know how to do, and that's how they manage to get away doing it. So this is the mission, and I'm going to need your help with this later in the session. Have your input on this. Drama. That's me. I'm an elf, right? You can tell because the pointy ears and my silver crown and my halo and the smirk smile as if I know something you don't know, right? That's what elves do, right? So I'm definitely an elf. I'm also Lars Kruse. As I said, I didn't have a job for 20 years. What I meant by that is I'm a consultant at heart. For the past 22 years, I worked in companies where I actually founded them myself or managed them myself or co-founded them. So I've been doing consulting in, I would say, continuous delivery, DevOps, and Agile for many years. And I have employed hundreds of, and mentored hundreds of software developers. I actually like to call them software designers. And we get to that later, why we don't use the term software engineers or software programmers. But I've also aided hundreds of companies in their endeavors to basically try to master continuous delivery, DevOps, Agile, stuff like that. So I think I'm in a position where I actually know what, both sides of the fence they want. I know a lot about what companies want because I've been servicing them since 2001. And I also know a lot about what software designers want when they get employed in a company. And this is like a sheer war zone, right? They don't want the same thing. And with the evolvement that we have in the labor market right now, maybe this is a problem because these people who don't want what the companies are offering them, they're actually pretty deliberate to go and find other jobs that they actually do like. So this might actually turn out to be a huge problem for companies who doesn't give the employees what they want. So the question is, what do they want? Nigel said something about you can't have your person agile or something like that. I mean, last time I did this, I actually placed Personal Jesus from Depeche Mode, and then I started out with my personal agile. I do have a personal agile, but this is what I'm going to talk to you about. I'm going back. It's actually not mine, but I just don't find my inspiration, in Scrum or whatever. I go even further back to Lean, or even further back to Fred Brooks, that we're going to talk about today. I believe that if software is eating the world, then we should fight it back with its own weapon, which is software, right? This is how software goes to battle. So this might be a bit of a paradox, but then again, this is a point that Fred Brooks made for us almost 50 years ago. So we're going to get to that. Before we get started, I would like you to, tell me if I was a character in the Lord of the Rings, which one? You see the resemblance? This is Legolas. I'm Legolas. Right? You get it? The halo and everything. So I want to be Legolas because he has the most badass quote in the entire movie. So you're going to get it now. Stay with me 10 seconds.
What's happening out there?
Shall I describe it to you? Or would you like me to find you a box?
Okay, so you ask, what's happening out there? And I have my smirk smile and say, shall I describe it to you? Or would you like me to find you a box? So this is what I'm going to do now. I'm going to try to describe to you what's happening out there. And I'm trying to basically make that point in a way that you maybe will end up believing me that I'm right. I don't know, but that's my smirk smile. I believe I'm right. Starting with the tar pit, right? Fred Brooke, or one of his famous writings, The Mythical Man-month, or No Silver Bullet. How many of you know of the guy or any of his writings? Hands up if you know who Fred Brooks is, or any of his writings. Hands up if you had no clue what I'm talking about. This is perfect, actually, because we're going to talk about Agile, but I'm not going to argue with you, right? Because you don't know Fred Brooks and I do, so this is perfect. I can just basically tell you what's happening here. He was one of the first, I'm going to give you a short bio. He's born in 1931, which basically makes him part of the silent cohort generation, the ones predating the boomers. So he's old. He's actually about the same age as my parents. He's a computer genius, an engineer, a scientist. He worked for 2 decades with IBM. He's the mastermind behind the System 360 mainframe from IBM. And he's also a professor at North Carolina University. He received several honors at the Turing Award and the National Medal of Technology in US. But in '75, he wrote a book called The Mythical Man-month. And this is probably what he's most famous of. The story goes that what gave him the inspiration for this book was when he was off-boarded at IBM. His manager came and asked him the question, how come that it's so much more difficult to handle a hardware team than it is to handle a software team? And the story goes that this is what inspired Fred to make this book. In the front page of his book, he put this image, which is an old copper stitch, which is basically the tar pit. And his problem, and the reason why I did that, is that software complexity is such a big thing that there's no way that we're not all going to get stuck in this, right? So the tar pit, Fred Brooks. I'm going to give you 4 takeaways from this book, and then we're going to move on to the next piece that he wrote. The first one is obviously his answer to his boss, right? When he was asked, why is it so difficult to manage software projects? He said, adding more manpower to a late software project makes it later. You know this rule, right? It's famous in our industry. What he said is that he observed that everything is happening, most things that happen in sequences are essentially better off not being added more manpower than they otherwise would be if we have left them alone. Yes, they would be late, but they will be more late trying to add more people into the hole, try to dig this hole bigger, because there's simply not enough room for them. The complexity of the communication, all that is not going to help anything. You can't rush a pregnancy, he says. And if you try, you'll probably end off on the wrong foot, right? So this is a very important message from Fred Brooks. Another thing that he does so brilliantly is that he introduces an analogy. He does that a lot, actually. He has a lot of stories, and he uses an analogy from a hospital and describes how surgeons are basically doing surgery on patients. And they organize themselves in teams that are 9 distinct roles. And now he's not talking about Scrum teams or software teams. He's talking about surgical teams in hospitals. But the point is that he would like us to organize ourselves in the same way. And he describes that he has a lot of statistics that basically shows that they're from his time, but he can basically tell for sure that software developers come in so many different varieties that they differ in a factor by more than 10 in how good they actually are at programming. So some of them are really, really, really good at programming, and some of them are really, 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 really not good at programming. And what he says is that we're going to organize the teams around the few ones that are really, really good at programming. And then what we're going to do is that we're not going to discard the other ones, but we're going to make them have a role that their purpose is simply to make this surgeon go faster, or safer, or better, right? But they're not going to do the surgery. The lead surgeons are, right? So he says that in the hospital, there's no democracy. There's only meritocracy. The person with the most merits leads the team. This is how we should do it in software. Interesting when we look at teams today, right? No democracy, only meritocracy. Another point he makes here is that you should plan to throw one away. What he means by that is that it's unavoidable that when you make software, you will apply technical depth to the software. So he says, for that reason, we should throw one away. He calls it a pilot version, but we should throw it away. And then he points out that the real problem here is that the management are actually planning to throw away the throwaway, or are they actually planning to release it? And I think this is what we see again and again, right? That you're supposed to throw one away. I think, if I'm not speaking too much, Henrik made the same point this morning, right? There are a lot of these prototypes, they're basically just, they're not going to be released, but they're part of the work process. The last takeaway from this book is, so famous that it's going to get its own slide. And I think that most of you have heard about it. It's Conway. It's a small secret. It's hidden in page 111 as a side mention. But what he does is that he uses Conway's law to make his point about the throwaway version. And he uses Conway because Conway made another, in a completely different context, another conclusion, which Fred Brooks is now putting on a pedestal and making a law. Organizations that design systems in broad sense are constrained to produce designs which are copies of the communication structures of these organizations. Basically what he says is, show me your system architecture and I can depict your organizational chart, right? This is how close they are. And this is not how it's supposed to be, but this is just, how it happens at first. So you're supposed to throw that away, right? So this was this was a famous book, and 10 years after, Fred would release an essay, which was like a 10-year anniversary on his own book, and he would call it No Silver Bullet. It was actually meant as a kind of an anniversary post to his own book, but he would make a very, very bold statement, a prophecy, a 10-year prophecy, that he would go out to a community, the entire world of software, people like us, and he would say that he would predict that within the next decade, within the next 10 years, there's not going to be a single development in either technology or management techniques or anything that will improve the way that we do software compared to how we improved hardware, not even by a magnitude of 1. So we're not even going to double our pace for the next 10 years. This actually caused quite a debate, because for 1986 and 10 years ahead, everybody was trying to hunt this silver bullet. And he said, there is no silver bullet. The way that he argued was with the essence and the accidents, which is kind of maybe hard to understand because he's not referring to our common everyday English language. He's referring to Aristotle's ontology, where Aristotle says that essence is the substance and everything around are basically accidents. And we would not call them accidents in our language. We would call them properties or abilities or whatever. But his point is that anything that happens surrounding the substance is not of any really importance. And he says that we can say for sure that complexity is in the essence. And he makes the point that this is different from the evolvement that we saw in hardware. Because in hardware, the past 10 years, remember at this point we're in 1986, right? But in hardware, we saw that all the problems were basically in the accidents, in the properties surrounding, not part of the substance. Basically, We were just not really good at making hardware, but hardware itself is not really difficult. And we got good at it, and then we solved the problem. But it's saying software is very, very different. Software is inherently complex. So there's nothing we can do about it. Just have to live with it. There's no silver bullet that can fix this. And then he makes another point. He says, for many, many years, we have believed that this is a construction paradigm, and we have been using construction metaphors. We have been architecting, we have been building, we have been scaffolding and releasing. We have been using construction metaphors for building software. And he did that himself in the book 10 years later. But he says, we're gonna stop doing that. We're gonna stop using these metaphors because there's no way that we can depict what needs to be described using these metaphors, because the problem is not construction, it's complexity. And then he starts looking at, where do we find complexity that is well done? In nature. But the difference about how we go about complexity in nature is that it's grown. It's a creative process. So he basically claims that we should stop building software or constructing software, and we should start growing software. Doesn't this sound like something that we all, started doing 20, 30 years later? So he's already out. Last one, he goes in and says, are there hopes for the silver? What could potentially help us if there's something that ever could? And he says, but this is by nature that the complexity is so high that we're never, ever going to fix this. He only sees actually one way which can be applied in two different methods. And that is by, instead of optimizing the code, is to reuse the code that is written more, right? So instead of having 10 different software developers inventing the wheel in proprietary situations around different companies, what if, as soon as you had one good implementation, everyone could use that, right? Like you don't roll your own crypto, you don't roll your own Agile. Every time someone did something really, really good, like inventing Linux or Git or something like that, you don't have to go and do that again. You can just use that, reuse that, right? So this is one way of doing it. Either start reusing, and he's a huge advocate for open source when he says this, or start abstracting. Abstract, basically wrap up software in software so that you don't have to do the software. He's actually hoping for libraries, packaging, object-oriented software, stuff like that. That just might help us. This is 1986. So there's a bit of drama. So there's no silver bullet, but if there's no silver bullet, then what? There's no miracle, right? So obviously we're gonna call for another hero.
Okay, so what do you need besides a miracle?
Guns. Lots of guns.
Neo. No one has ever done anything like this.
That's why it's going to work.
Okay, so we actually have a problem here that cannot be solved by a miracle, and it can only be solved by, lots of guns. So many ordinary, dull lead bullets that you cannot possibly imagine. We're just going to shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot. How are we going to solve the complexity in software? Guesses? Software. Damn, yeah. We're going to have abstractions, right? We're going to make software basically work through the means of abstractions. So one way that we can make software go away is that if we can take the problem, program it, persist it in files, store it in the version control, make it have a log and a history, make it executable, and make that execution completely immutable so that the outcome can be replaced or replayed by others. By doing that, we can start reusing software in a very safe way. And we have seen this explode in many ways. This is still the future of software. Software is going to eat software. So, I'm just asking you out loud, did Agile improve software with even an order of 1 magnitude? Even if you didn't prove Fred wrong, right? Because Agile was only 2001, so that was well out his 10 years prophecy. But what do you think? No? No, probably not. I would say probably yes for smaller teams, but definitely not for large organizations. I'm an Agile evangelist, and I believe that Agile doesn't scale. Agile is a team methodology. And one of the things that really, really happened from 2001 and what may look like a huge success for Agile is essentially some of the other things that also happened around the same time of Agile came about. In 1996, the LAMP stack, the first really useful version of the LAMP stack was released. And this is really interesting. LAMP is an acronym of Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP, right? So, and these are all open source technology that emerged in 96. And actually what they start using the internet protocol, HTTPS, which is also released in its first version 1.0, also around that time. Before that, it was only basically in beta. So a lot of things happened around this stack. And what it basically means that everyone, geeks at university or everyone who just has a computer back in the garage, they can basically start utilizing all these tools, which are essentially just abstractions, right? Of something that's already out there, but now they don't have to build it themselves. They can stand on top of that. And this really, really, really makes the internet explode. From 2001 to 2011, it's insane what happens in the space of computer. And this is maybe not just due to Agile, but also partly due to Agile. Because what happened in this period was that a lot of small teams would start off on huge endeavors that we otherwise would have said, this is not going to work. 4 people can't cut this, right? But they were working like surgical teams, and they were working Agile, and they were utilizing a lot of software extractions, and they got a lot for free, and they joined into open source communities where they could basically have collaborations with each other, and that was a revolution, together with Agile. So, in 2011, Mark Andreessen, which is not a software developer, but he's a venture capitalist and investor in LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Foursquare. Some of them he even co-founded. He made a very, very famous article in the Wall Street Journal, where this was the title: "Why Software is Eating the World." And as I said, he wasn't a computer technician or anything. So his point was essentially that he just observed where does the money go. And he made in 2011 saying, you know what? Software is here to stay. Invest in software. Software is good. Software is here to stay. And actually that sounds pretty obvious today. But in 2011, people were still, is this a fling? Is this a real thing? Or is it going to go away? Right? But he nailed it. Say 2011, this is here to stay. Invest in software. Software is eating the world. So if software is eating the world, I think an interesting question pops up. How many software developers are there in the world to fight software eating the world? So if we just look at the numbers of professionals, people who have a degree in software programming or engineering or remotely related to software, how many people in the entire world in 2022 do you think that are professional software developers? Shout out your guess. 100 millions. How many? 5 millions. 105, okay. Can we, the wisdom of the crowd shout? 50. 7, okay, okay. But I think we're going to end up, on an average, which is about, the wisdom of these 4 people together. It's true that there are somewhere between estimated 24 and 26 million people in the world who has a degree in software computing. That's not a lot if software is truly eating the world. So there might be more people. We're estimating 6-8 million people who might also be working in software, but without having a degree. But still, it's not a large number. So while I was scouting for these numbers on the internet, I also came across this prediction here, which basically says that the next 18 months, and this is this spring, this is back in April, I found this in a report from there, says that for the next 18 months, we will produce as much software jointly in the world as we have done together for the past 40 years. There's no way that this is going to scale. You see that? If you're a mediocre Danish bank and you have 150 software developers employed in Copenhagen who all speak Danish, there's no way that in 2, 5, 7 years there's going to be 150 software developers for you, right? It's a scarce resource. And these people who are now coming out on the market, they can pick and choose because nobody's forcing them essentially to work in Java or relational databases or Kubernetes clusters or whatever. They can just go and do fun stuff, and they will. So this is a huge problem. So software is, I claim, software is eating software. And it has already got Agile, and it has already swallowed DevOps, right? It's game over. If I were a youngster coming out today, if I were Generation Z assumer, I would not start hacking Kubernetes clusters. I would just basically go and rip something off the shelf, and I would give everything for free, and I would get started at, making delicious software to my end users. So, we're back in what Henrik described in the beginning, right? Where this keynote this morning, where he described that we tend to go vertical, right? So we have a lot of learning in the beginning, and then we get all the dull stuff in the end, and that's not a lot of learning. So we tend to do all the fun stuff up there. But the thing is that if we can extract all the dull stuff away, then we can actually start, just working up there where it's only fun. We get a lot of learning, and we actually have built-in quality. Not because we have to build in the quality, because there are so many good tools out there that can build in quality for us. And maybe we don't know that, but we're also Generation X and boomers and mostly men. But the young people, they actually know that, and it is impressive what they can produce. So, I know how I got here. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how my journey. I told you I had 6 companies that brought me here. The last one is a company called incinc. This was meant just for me as a single consultant. I'm checking out. I'm just working by myself now. I had large companies. I sold them. I would never employ people again. It's a hassle, managing people. So I would never go there again. So that's a great learning to take away from doing a startup. But that's just me. What I did 6 months ago is that I invited in a guy called Simon. He's a millennial. He's 29. He's actually young enough to be my son. Actually, I have a daughter who's 30, so I could actually be his father. His parents are younger than I am. And what we wanted to do is that we both had, kind of a sweet spot for the whole startup environment. And we wanted to do SaaS product development. So we wanted to basically check out, right, and tune in on product development. We don't want to do shitty software development for shitty management. We want to, be our own bosses and do delicious software. And we saw that in the startup environment, what is happening is that a lot of startups are needing skilled CTOs. So we thought we're going to go in there and help them because this is the most dire need that we have in startups right now. Everyone wants to do SaaS products. No one in the startup environment knows diddly squat about software development. So we thought there's a spot for us in there. So we want to be a startup accelerator or a startup incubator. Think Antler or Founders or something like that, right? So big dreams when you do a startup. So we were imagining that we would go out and we would see startups that would be essentially agile, and they would do build, measure, learn, and they would know anything that Eric Rice or Steve Blank or any of these startup gurus basically told us, go out, investigate, you'll find your market fit, please your customers and come back and implement the software. We thought that we would basically be in that collaborative learning space, right? but we were really disappointed. I mean, like most startups, we found out that this is not happening. Over the course of 6 months, we interviewed 30 startups, and that was actually curated out of a list of more than 100. And we ended up doing technical due diligence on 5 or 6 startups, basically scrutinizing their code, seeing is there any good here? And we got so disappointed. They literally had no clue about software. That was anticipated, right? But what we didn't know was that they actually didn't care. They really truly believed that they were standing on a gold mine. And what we could see is that the software that they had underneath was a time bomb waiting to explode. And when we told them that we would like to come in and help them, start grow software instead of, continuing with this, we basically saw that both venture capitalists, startup founders, and business angels really didn't get it. They weren't interested in this. They were just basically, chasing that, 10 times sell ticket, right, out there in copying what all the other unicorns, allegedly did, but no one actually really did. It's just storytelling. So I came up with a rant. So I just said something about you should not quote yourself in a speak in front of such a large audience, but I'm just going to show you the Lakruzz Law, because I was seeing something that resembled what Conway described, right? That this is due to organizations. Basically, they have built a throwaway and it should be throwaway. So, and essentially, this depicts how they're organized. Essentially, they don't have a CTO, so they go and buy a piece of software in Vietnam. That's part of their organization, right? And it's a shitty one, and they're not, going to throw it away and build it right with CTOs on board. So what we saw is that any organization that sets out on a certain tool stack, processes included, will remain on that stack until eternity or end of life, whichever comes first. Okay, this was a bit of a rant, but we basically said that, okay, we're going to fail cheap, and we're going to turn this into a product lab. We want to basically discover how can anybody, not just startups, but essentially anybody, go out and actually do what Fred encouraged us to do 50 years ago. How can we work really, really fast with abstractions? We saw people out there that were actually able to take an idea, learn how to code a NoCode or LowCode tool, and in 10, 12, 18 months actually ship that off and even sell their startups. These are people who were completely pippies, right? I've never done that before, so yes, I can do that. And people will say, no, you can't do that, and they did it, right? And there are tools out there that can do that. And we basically started saying, okay, but this is what we want to do. We want to explore what are these tools that can do for us today in 2022, what object-oriented and packet managers did for us 20 years ago. How can we basically, create brilliant software very, very fast so that we can fail cheap, right? Not fail early, right? Because some misunderstand the distinction between fail early and fail cheap. We have SCAT, the Danish tax authorities. They're building an MVP, a minimum viable product. They spent 12 years and 5.5 billion Danish kroners on an MVP. So definitely when we talk minimum viable product, that's not what we talk about. We're more, in the category of minimum lovable products, and we want them out there fast, really, really fast, meaning cheap. Because we want to engage with the users. Enter a whole new setup, a school, an organization. This is where I really got intrigued, because I have a friend who works as a education manager at the Copenhagen School of Design and Technology, and I was nagging about this because they basically teach people, not even Docker or Kubernetes, but they basically teach people UML, Rational Unified Process. They teach people how to do Java constructors. The teachers are fighting, should we maybe next term start, teaching people in JavaScript, and say, no, it's never going to happen. They need to learn how to code for real, right? So, yeah, and this is a debate. So I basically mocked him and said, we're going to change this. We're going to do something. People are really going to learn something that's useful when they get out there. And we tried to organize ourselves in a way where we could actually go in and help them, but we couldn't. Because these universities can only pay very few amounts of hours on an invoice. So I actually took a full-time job. For the first time in my entire life, I am now, since 30 days back, engaged in Copenhagen Designer School and technology, and I'm going to do a full semester program where we're trying to teach software as a service product development in interdisciplinary skills in teams of 6. Right? So we will be creating a real product. Right? We're not scratching the surface. We're not, elaborating or doing anything like that. We're basically putting a real product in the hands of people with real needs, and we're doing it over the course of the semester. That's 20 weeks, and we're going to organize these people. You remember Henrik's drawing when he said we have designers and we have coders, right? And what we do is that we take a third one in there and say market analysts or the business IT people, business developers. So we want to put business developers and software developers and people who are really, really good at doing UX and delicious, graphical design. And we're going to put them together and we're going to make them make software for us. And they're allowed to cheat. They're not going to start, doing JavaScript constructors or, fire up a relational database on a virtual machine anywhere out there. They're just going to basically use a lot of no-code frameworks and not a low-code frameworks. They're going to cheat. They're going to use managed services. They're going to cheat every way they can because it's not important to optimize your Kubernetes cluster. It's important to get feedback from your users. Keep your eyes on the ball. So this is what we are up for. And Simon and I, we did what we thought we meant it to be a favor. So we would say, if we're old people, Simon is not old, and we're good together. It's not like Batman and Robin. Sometimes when I'm the older one, I try to be fatherly, towards him. And he basically reminds me that this is not what's happening. And now we actually made that change. So he's now the CTO of the company. I'm just basically a chairman or an advisor. I'm over here working at the school, right? So Simon is on his own and he's building his own team. But we did this one together, standing on the shoulders that everything that we have learned collectively for the past 2, maybe 3 decades, we're putting it into only 10 pieces of advice that a Zoomer maybe should know if they want to do software. And then that's it. From there, they can go and pick any tool stack they want. The first one is basically build the right team. If you want to do something, make sure that the people that you need, if you want to do a surgical team, right? There are 9 people in there, right? This is how they, have optimized, saving people's life in hospitals, right? And again, a lot of things that we need in software. We need delicious design. We need, market fit. We need understanding of usability and stuff like that. So we need to have everyone on board. Then we need to automate absolutely everything, right? And there are a trillion of tools out there that can do this for us. So I'm not basically saying that we should invent, automation tools. We should basically use automation tools instead. And we should test in production. And by that, I mean exactly what Henrik described this morning. We should go and test in the community where the people are. We should test in production because in production, that's where our users are. So that's why we should test in production and in production only, right? I'm not saying that we should ship flaws and errors, bad code that's going to break, but we should basically treat everything as an assumption, like a hypothesis, and then we should go out and test it. And we should make it scale. This should be built scalable. And then you think, yeah, okay, but there we got some, Kubernetes, right? But yeah, you can build that in Kubernetes. And I know, at the DevOps conference, we had people from Uber, or anyone from Uber? But they were basically explaining how they built a completely hybrid managed console or backend in Uber, and that's a huge endeavor for them. But there were like 6 people employed, basically just optimizing the infrastructure. And again, if we were listening to Fred, who would do that? Why don't we go out and buy that from Google? Because they're really, really good at optimizing infrastructure. So why would we build our own infrastructure? There might be cases why you want to do that, Maybe, but mostly because at some point it gets too expensive. But you need to get quite far because before that's a really expensive solution. And then what people do, they actually pull always the gold-plated magic card. GDPR. We're not allowed to do that. But that's bullshit. You are. It's just an easy way out, right? Gonna pick the right tool stack. You're gonna listen to your customers. And again, Henrik this morning, perfect example. We're gonna establish ways that we can actually hear what the users are saying to us, because it's the only thing that matters, right? Basically, what is their feedback? That's important. We're gonna be data-driven. We're gonna use that data. We're gonna make it insanely easy for users to onboard our product, because the time between hey, I want to join this product, and if you got 15 seconds to onboard, right? But if you already spent people's time 40 seconds, you're out, right? This is one of the biggest churns that we can measure: time to onboard on your software. And we're still selling software. We say, you want to be a customer of ours? Perfect. What we do is that we're going to send a team of 3 consultants, and then we're going to scrutinize your infrastructure, and 6 months later, we'll have you onboarded on our platform. But these young people, they don't know what they're doing, right? They basically say, 40 seconds, that's too much. Let's see if we can, make 20 seconds, 15 seconds. 15 seconds to onboard a new user. That's impressive. And they're doing it, you know it, right? From all the tools that you're using, but maybe they're not the ones that you're using on your work. We also need to onboard developers really, really easy, right? Because this is going to be, everyone is going to come from everywhere, so we're going to onboard a lot of software developers. If software developers are a scarce resource, it's very important that we can basically take a software developer, pull him or her in for 2 weeks, 2 months, half a year, and then allow them to go on. But if we're going to pull in a software developer who's going to work for us 2 weeks, then it's going to be really, really easy to onboard that person. Otherwise, it's not worthwhile, right? So this is what is called developer experience, right? We're going to make that developer experience really, really important, and we're going to be design-led instead of design-fed. And what we mean by that is that aesthetics is what we believe is going to be the next problem or the next thing in software, right? We all know it. If you're going to onboard something and it's crappy, you're out of there, faster than you can shout, I'm out of here, right? So if software is not delicious, it's not going to attract any users in the future, right? Because it's so easy, basically, to make another product which is going to compete with that product, and it's going to be exactly the same. It's built, from Lego blocks. They can just pull off all the managed services from the cloud providers, and then you can make a better user interface, and then you can win over the customers. And this is what's going to happen. This is what we see again and again. So it's got to be delicious. So we came up with the term DevX instead of DevOps, right? The next big challenge is aesthetics. And we're going to invite everyone in to DevX who think that they can contribute to making software delicious and easy. We're going to make them first-class citizens. We're basically going to copy what DevOps did to the whole software and agile world, basically inviting ops and system admins into the development teams. Because DevOps really, really clever saw that infrastructure is not an accident. It's part of the substance, its essence. And this is why we invited software developers into our team, sysadmins into our teams. And over the course of less than 15 years, DevOps movement started in 2008, right? So it's, about 15 years, we managed to turn infrastructure into code. And we're going to turn the entire world into code, inviting everyone into software development teams. So it's not DevOps, it's DevX, X for everyone, right? We have built a community. This is early days, right? So we're 30 days into this revolution, right? So you'll have to join us, right? But we have built a community of practice, which is a thing that essentially is described as a demilitarized zone, right? So the schools are not going to go out into the industry and have them, defer their teaching to them. And we're also not going to invite the industry into the schools and have them basically dictate what's being taught at the schools, because this is really not about teaching. This is about learning. Like Malte showed, right, in his slides. Basically, how can you create a community where people feel welcome? And so we're calling it a community of practice. We didn't invent that term. It's actually something that you use as a in situated learning. So there's a whole theory around this, where people are allowed into these demilitarized zone and can work together. So I would like you to join. Actually, we have a hackathon on Thursday on NoCode tools. So we're going to announce that on that LinkedIn later today. I don't think we maybe only have 25 spots, so it's going to be first sign up, first serve. But if it's popular one, we're going to do it again. But essentially, we have found a curated list of no-code tools, which basically contains more than 50 tools that you can basically start coding in without knowing how to code. And this is how we're going to solve this problem that software is eating the world.
Lars?
Yeah, we're done. We're done, right? We're done.
You used up your complete time.